Thank you for joining us today for the Senate Education Committee meeting. We are continuing with our confirmation hearings for the Kansas Board of Regents regent nominations. Today we will have the hearing with Mr. Winter. Again, the Senate Confirmation Oversight Committee met on June 28th. The committee then met again on June 30th in remote, and at that time a motion was made to move the three candidates forward. These nominations and recommendations were based on information received from the appointees on the Senate Confirmation Information Summary. Since the committee met back in June, additional information has been obtained, and the three nominees were sent back to the Senate Education Committee for review and recommendation. So today is our last hearing for those nominees. And so at this time, I will again set our ground rules. We will start with Mr. Winter having 5 minutes to present an opening statement, and then we will have questions from our senators. There will be 5-minute time limit, and so we do ask that the conferee, please, when you hear our administrative assistant's phone ringy-dingy, we need you to finish. So didn't have as good a compliance yesterday as we wanted, but we'll work on that today. We'll try and stay on track. Also, I will let you know and let the senators know when we have just 1 minute left in the 5 minutes. So that means you need to wrap up that question and we will move forward. So at this time, we welcome to the Senate Education Committee, Mr. Winter.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members of the committee, I appreciate the opportunity to meet and discuss this important issue. First of all, before I get into my family background, I want to just say, as far as I'm concerned, what this job is all about are students. There's tens of thousands of students in this state currently at our colleges, universities, and other schools for whom this work is very, very important. So I always try to remember why we're here. The customers of the Board of Regents are the students. I want to highlight at this point in time how my family and I have greatly benefited from a Kansas education, which will help explain my passion for service on the Board of Regents. I then want to identify how those experiences might help me meet the challenges and opportunities that we have in Kansas higher education. My great-great-grandfather and grandmother left what is now West Virginia in 1856 and homesteaded between Lawrence and Lecompton. In 1869, they joined with other Kansas pioneers and built the first one-room schoolhouse in that area, which was named Winter School in recognition of the donation by the Winter family of the ground on which the school was built. My family just completed a renovation of the Winter School last year, and it was named to the National in Kansas list of historic places. We're very proud of that. My grandmother and grandfather met at Kansas State University, where my grandfather was a multi-sport letter winner. He obviously didn't pass down the athletic genes quite as much as I would like him to, but so it is. My family endowed the Fay and Ship Winter Scholarship for students in the College of Agriculture at KSU. My father went to KU, where he was a football letter winner and graduated from the University of Kansas Law School after serving in the United States Marine Corps. My mother graduated from Mount Carmel High School in Wichita and also attended KU, where she met my father. My dad and mom moved to Ottawa, where dad entered private law practice and served in the Kansas Senate for 12 years, including as chairperson of the Ways and Means Committee. He was a rancher and ended his career as a small community banker. My wife grew up in Prairie Village and attended KU, where she and I met. Mary taught first grade in St. John Grade School in Lawrence during the early years of our marriage, and our three daughters attended and graduated from the University of Kansas. As the oldest of 5 children, I, along with my brothers and sisters, attended Ottawa Public Junior and High School. I attended the University of Kansas on a football scholarship, and I'm a proud letter winner. The most important part of that sports experience, I might add, however, was I saw how a college education meant so much to many of my teammates who were first-generation students and economically disadvantaged, and but for that scholarship, would not have had the benefits of higher education. I attended KU Law School probably because my coach told me that I should not try to be a professional football player, and I took his advice. Or I was fortunate enough to finish in the top 5 of our graduating class of about 140 students. I value greatly the high-quality education my family and I all received in Kansas. It improved our lives greatly. I joined a law firm in Lawrence in 1978 and served in the Kansas Senate from 1982 to 1992, where I was chairman of the Judiciary Committee and vice chairman of the Ways and Means Committee. In 2000, I joined the Family Community Bank, where we survived the 2008 recession and grew the bank to locations in more than 10 states. My training and experience as a lawyer will help me approach this regent's job with analytical reasoning and open-minded fact-finding, followed by decisive decision-making. My service in the Senate will help me approach the job knowing the importance of collaborative discussion with various stakeholders, the need to respectfully challenge existing governmental processes if needed, and the importance of demonstrating efficient use of taxpayer and tuition funds. I will also be mindful of the possible need to seek input on legislative intent if the law or appropriations involving the Board of Regents are unclear.
1 minute.
I am not new to the higher education policy arena, and in fact, I'm on record with my commitment to utilizing higher ed in the fight for more jobs. In 1986, as chairman of a special legislative joint committee on economic development, our committee said, and I quote, "The following recommendations are designed to strengthen the education, research, and technology foundation of Kansas and to systemically link them to the business sector. They recognize that technological innovation is the sustaining force behind the development of new jobs. I want my grandchildren and other children in Kansas to have the same opportunities that I had from Kansas higher ed, including the chance to stay and live in Kansas. The question of how to ensure the sustainability of our higher education system looms large for all of us, and I look forward to further discussions on that topic today as time allows."
Perfectly timed. Thank you so much. There we go. Okay. Let's go ahead and get started with our questions, and we'll start with Senator Gossage.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Excuse me. Thank you.
Yes, and may I call you Went?
You can call me. Yes, you can.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Went, of course, I first met you years ago when HSAs were first passed in around 2004. And I was asked to come to People's Bank and help start some HSAs there. We sat down together in your office and talked about them. I want to apologize that when you called me over Christmas break, I was actually having Christmas with my family on that day and was unable to visit with you then. And I apologize that things just got so crazy I didn't get a chance.
I'm the one
to
that should
call you.
apologize. I'm
No,
sorry I interrupted your family.
You could not have known. That's all right. I do have to say, though, do you remember those old scary movies where there would be a pod and then it looked like someone, but it wasn't that real person? I want to say, where's the Winter I used to know? And the reason I'm saying that is I see that you would be replacing my dear friend Helen Van Etten, who's the National Committee Woman for the state of Kansas for the Republican Party, and that you have an R after your name. But yet I've not seen you in many years. I don't remember at any Republican events, at any Republican campaigns, at any Republican community events, conventions. And so I have to ask, when I see that, I know when you used to support Bob Dole, Nancy Kassebaum, but then it became Paul Davis, Greg Orman, anybody against a Republican candidate, Laura Kelly, et cetera. So I have to ask, my first question is, do you support the Republican Party platform?
Senator, I'm a Republican, and I have been a Republican since the day when I was 18 years old when I registered to vote. And I've been a Republican every day of my life, and I have every intention of remaining a Republican throughout my life. When I went to the state Senate when I was about 29 years old, there were 21 Republicans and 19 Democrats. And I was quickly told and learned that in order to get anything done, we all had to reach across the aisle on appropriate issues and find ways to pass proper legislation. I do indeed intend to be less partisan than some, and I've worked for both Republican and Democratic candidates in the past. And I think that's important to work together to find solutions. I plan to remain a Republican the rest of my life, working to have a strong two-party system. It is the wide range of thoughts that make the Republican Party strong, not weak, as some others may claim. While some conversations are difficult, in the end, we strive toward the unity needed for all of us to prosper. When I was in the Senate, we obviously had to have a very tight caucus. With only 21 of us, it was important that we stay together. And I was together on those issues where it was very important for the party. I appreciate your question. I am indeed maybe one of the most nonpartisan people you know, but I have important values, particularly around higher education.
Thank you. Obviously, you were prepared for that question because I can tell those were prepared remarks. I appreciate that. And if you could speak to this, in the newspaper editorial, you characterize Kansas pro-life advocates as bullies. Are all pro-life advocates bullies by your standards, and why or why not?
No, of course they're not. And if I said that, then that was not an appropriate thing to say. I think I suppose what I was thinking was all of us on issues like that, the death penalty, for example, right to life issues, we feel very strongly about those. And all of us, to some extent, convey those strong feelings in that way. I respect those issues. In fact, I think that it's critically important that all of us continue to work around and express our very strongly held beliefs about that issue.
Thank you. Do I have time for one more?
You do.
Thank you. Then I noticed in the Lawrence Journal World, this was March 2nd of 2020, and you mentioned that you served as state senator from Lawrence, 83 to 92, and also served as chairman of the Save Kansas Coalition. You mentioned in your paperwork here that there might be some concerns that their position on certain things could cause a problem for you. That's my paraphrase. Could you list what some of those might be, and the fact that you mentioned that the Kansas health policy was taken over by ultra-conservatives? And does that mean my time is up, or could he answer?
He's going to answer, and he's going to answer concisely.
Thank you. Good direction. The Save Kansas Coalition was an outgrowth of something called Republicans for Kansas Values. That organization was a group of between 50 and 80 former state legislators who united around about only one thing, and that was fiscal policy and Governor Brownback's tax experiment. The Republicans for Kansas Values included majority leaders, speakers, et cetera. All of us had very firm beliefs about the fiscal integrity of the state. But it was not a education PAC. So it was decided to formulate an education PAC, 501c4, to help educate on those issues. So that's what the Save Kansas Coalition is, Senator.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Senator Petty.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Thanks, Whit, for being here. It was nice to see you again after being on the Oversight Committee and approving you at that time. I know that I see from a letter that we've received from a business owner that's involved with the Kansas Chamber that you have a strong support for more jobs, well-prepared graduates, and the quality of life in Kansas. And then as I looked over your packet of information again, I've noticed so many groups that you've been involved in, so many organizations that you've been a member of or president of, and I was just wondering if you could reflect on those boards and share with us what you see, how you see either one of them or many of them assisting you in this role on the regions.
Well, of course, you know, we're all a mixture of years and years and years of thought processes and organizations, et cetera. So it's hard for me to pick out one of them. Obviously, my involvement is stretched across political parties and political philosophies, et cetera, et cetera. One thing I do want to say, if I can, that one of the things I've learned in my 6 or 7 months on the State Board of Regents is that I think the big question that we have facing us is the need for, sustainability for higher education. There are a number of statistical issues that we need to pay attention to, things that I think call upon us to be a little more assertive and reform-minded about the way we do things. For example, in the last 10 years, last 5 years, higher education in Kansas enrollment has exceeded a reduction by 10%. Also, public confidence in higher education is down. 48% of U.S. adults expressed a great deal of confidence in higher education, and only, and then 5 years before that, 57%. So it's gone down almost 10%. So we need to ask ourselves, why is it that the public is losing confidence in higher ed? Why is it that we have enrollment declines? Why is it that we continue to see more press attention to issues like this, the affordability issue? This one happens to be about the debt trap of student loans. So I would tell you that my passion in regard to the Board of Regents, this particular board, is about reform, and it's about making sure that we figure out a way to react to these systemic issues, systemic challenges, and look to reforms where they're appropriate.
Thank you. My second question is, I know you're well aware that we're in the first year of the Promise Scholarship, and that it's being very well received among the community colleges, and so one of the issues, it seems, over time has been this relationship with the regents and the community colleges, and I'd like you to share how you think you can bring some work onto the regents to improve that relationship for all of our students.
Well, unlike my colleague Carl Eyes, I did not attend community colleges, but I can tell you that my experience on the board at this point is that we need much better collaboration between and among trade colleges, community colleges, and universities. We're missing the boat. There's still a bit of an attitude, perhaps, in the four-year colleges that they somehow are up here and the community colleges are on a different level. That must not be the case. The community colleges are so important to us, and I think we need to be sure that we're looking for ways to collaborate much better between the two-year and four-year colleges.
Thank you. Senator Solentrop.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon, Mr. Winter.
Afternoon, Senator.
Referring to question number 9, according to the Kansas Ethics Commission records, you have made contributions to Kansas State Senate campaigns for more than 20 years. In the interest of full disclosure and transparency, and because the Kansas Senate must vote to confirm members of the Kansas Board of Regents, have you, your spouse, or any immediate family member contributed monies, given in-kind contributions, or otherwise played a role in the campaign of any current member of the Kansas Senate, and if so, who?
Senator, I apologize for the fact that I have not done the research in my records or research in the Ethics Commission to tell you, to be able to specifically answer that question. I obviously, like many of us here, have a political background. Mine stretches 40 years. And so I have contributed over the years to many different people and candidates. I don't recall that I have made political contributions of any significance to sitting members of the House or Senate. And certainly, I think that I just don't have any recollection of any particular significant contribution.
Thank you. Have you been cited for a breach of ethics or unprofessional conduct, or been named in any complaint to any court, administrative agency, professional association, disciplinary committee, or other profession? If so, would you provide the details?
Senator, if I can, are you referring to one of the questions on the questionnaire? Because if you are, I'd be glad to.
Number 27.
Number 27, thank you. I don't recall that I have been cited for any breach of ethics or for unprofessional conduct. Can't recall that I've been named in a complaint to any court personally, and or any other professional group. We have had, certainly in my role as CEO and chairman of the board of a bank, have had a number of different litigation matters, et cetera, involving the bank. None of them involve me personally that I have any recollection about.
Do I understand you were CEO of People's Bank in Lawrence?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Correct.
I've got a press release here that indicates the Federal Reserve Board on Tuesday issued a consent order against People's Bank of Lawrence for deceptive residential mortgage origination practices in violation of Section 5 of the Federal Trade Commission Act. People's told certain borrowers that they were paying an additional amount for discount points that would lower the borrower's interest rate. And many borrowers did not receive a reduced rate. The consent order requires Peoples to pay approximately $2.8 million into an account to provide restitution under these conditions. So what you're saying is that as CEO, as an owner of that institution, that does not implicate you personally?
Senator, you're referring, I'm sure, to this consent order, which I'm very familiar with, in which I have done a lot of research.
1 minute.
Excuse me?
1 minute.
That consent order was a matter of some significant dispute between our bank and the Federal Reserve Bank. We hired very experienced Washington, D.C. lawyers. It did not involve me personally. It did not involve any of our officers or employees. If I can, I'd like to read you an excerpt from a letter that our lawyer wrote to Senator Masterson and Senator Sykes.
Oh, you may provide that to the committee.
Correct.
Do you have a follow-up question?
The order itself indicates in letter H, the misrepresentation in the disclosures concerning discount points and interest rates are material because they relate to the cost of the loan paid by borrowers. The deficiency specified in paragraph A through H above for the period of January 1, 2011 through and including March 5th were relevant and resulted in deceptive practices or in affecting commerce within the meaning of Section 5A in unsafe or unsound banking practices. So what you're telling me is that as a licensed attorney, as an owner of the bank, for 4 years, this was not something that you were personally involved with.
What I'm telling you, Senator, is that those allegations, those findings, those recommendations by the Federal Reserve Bank were very much disputed by us. We denied them. We engaged counsel from Washington, D.C., and if I can, I will read that portion of his letter. I am an expert on the laws surrounding mortgage lending and previously...
Mr. Winters, you will provide that to the committee. You will provide it to the committee assistant, and she will make sure everyone gets a copy.
Thank you.
One more quick comment, if I may, Madam Chair.
I will circle back around to you.
Okay. Sure.
Senator Erickson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you so much, Mr. Winters, for being here today. Couple of quick questions. In a published story out of Salina on September 9th, 2016, you're quoted as saying, quote, "Unfortunately, Sam's not on the ballot, but as proxies are, I think it's going to be virtually impossible for Brownback's legislative lemmings to run from him," unquote. So are members of the Kansas Senate that were reelected in 2016, would you still classify them as lemmings?
No, of course not. As I said before, excuse me, the work that many of us did to form Republicans for Kansas Values arose directly out of our concern about Governor Brownback's tax policies. That was what we were all concerned about. And the reference to lemmings was not a reference to any particular senator. It was a reference to those the philosophy about that Governor Brownback was talking about in terms of his tax and budget policies. So it wasn't meant as any suggestion whatsoever that any legislator didn't think and didn't have independent judgment. It was simply a reference to followers. I should have used the word followers as opposed to lemmings.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I would think that you would know that a relationship with the legislature is important as in your role as a member of the Board of Regents. And so my follow-up to that would be, so if you don't agree with an action on the part of the legislature, is it your standard practice to refer, call names and refer to others that you disagree with in a derogatory manner?
I certainly hope not, Senator. There are times when I use flowery language. I use language as a lawyer. I'm an advocate, and sometimes I allow my role as an advocate to get in the way of the use of some better, more appropriate language. So I can tell you it's very, very important that the legislature and the regents have a good relationship. In fact, one of the things I think that is an opportunity for the regents to improve on is to engage much more frequently and much more seriously with committees like this and the legislature on topics. I'm surprised a little bit that we have not been as engaged at the Board of Regents with the legislature on policy issues, and I would hope to be able to change that.
Well, we don't have flowery language in the legislature anymore, so with that.
Change then, if not.
My next question is referring to your application and your resume. You list your relevant past experience that qualifies you to become a member of the Kansas Board of Regents. You include CEO of People's Bank of Lawrence and being co-chairman of the Board of Directors at People's Bank of Lawrence. Please share how you became CEO and co-chairman of the Board of People's Bank.
In 1973, I think, my father and another guy bought a bank in Ottawa, Kansas. Over the years, they grew that bank. It ended up growing until 2018 when we sold it. We had more than 20 branches in 10 states. We had primary banking facilities, in Kansas, New Mexico, and Colorado. I was at that point in time, obviously, I was at college. I then went to law school. I decided to pursue a legal career, so I was not involved day to day in the banking business. In 2000, however, my father and others in my family asked me to become more involved, so I did.
I do. Thank you. Thank you for that. My final question is, Senator Suellentrop mentioned a $2.8 million settlement. So my question is, were students from KU, K-State, Fort Hays State, and Haskell Indian College, were they compensated from this $2.8 million settlement due to the deceptive loan practices of People's Bank?
Well, first of all, let me say again that we vigorously denied the allegations of anything that was inappropriate. That was a significant dispute that we had with the Federal Reserve Bank. And the answer to that is I don't know. There were 2,300 folks involved in of our customers, which, by the way, was about 2% of our total customer base. That work was all regarding home purchases, so mortgage purchases to buy a house or refinance. And as we all know, very, very, very few students have the ability to meet the federal guidelines for borrowing for mortgages. So I would doubt very seriously that there were any students involved.
Thank you, Mr. Winters. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Senator Straub.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First of all, after hearing all of this about the issues with the People's Bank and that case, and reviewing your resume here and your extensive background in involvement with your church and the bank and all of your law experience, I can say that I need to work on my own resume and all the things that I'm involved in. This is quite the list. But I think for myself, my most valuable experience is being a mother. And I don't see a lot here that you've talked a lot about your children. And I'm concerned about this issue at the bank because I want to know what makes you a good role model to serve on the Board of Regents, considering some of these past experiences.
Well, Senator, I can tell you, as I mentioned in my remarks, we have 3 daughters. We have 8 grandchildren. They are extremely important to us. In fact, last weekend, one of our granddaughters and her 2 sons, aged 2 and 3, live in Detroit. And my wife and I decided for her 40th birthday, which was last weekend, to go there to take our other 2 daughters, surprise her, and have a family reunion in Detroit for those 3 days. That was very important to us. I took that time off and didn't bother with responding to emails about this issue, et cetera, et cetera. I will say, and I will defend myself vigorously in any suggestion that I am not a family person, that I am not a great father, that I'm not a great grandfather. Those are very important things to me and to my wife. In fact, the reason she's not here is that she's taking care of a couple of our granddaughters who live in Lawrence.
Thank you for that. And to ask some of the same questions that I've asked the previous candidates, whatever, appointees. I have had a number of constituents from my district and students to both universities and community colleges that have received emails from instructors or professors offering extra credit for proof of vaccination, offering academic extra credit for proof of vaccination. How do you feel about that?
That's inappropriate. If there's any extra credit, it should be tied directly to the course curriculum and to the course content, and it should be identified in the course content that extra credit is available for X, Y, or Z. I've been vaccinated twice. I've been boosted. I'm a big believer in vaccinations, but not all of us believe that. And it would be highly inappropriate to start mixing academic issues with health issues, especially those that are so personal to us all. One of the sayings that I've used in my background that has come to my mind in regard to this whole issue of mandatory X, Y, and Z is that a person, a man or a woman, convinced against his or her will remains unconvinced still. So it's extremely difficult for the government to use its power to demand and require changes in behavior. So I think that if that happened, it was inappropriate, and I would certainly take action as a member of the Board of Regents to prevent any future incidents like that.
Thank you. I appreciate your answer on that because we have seen very little lack of anyone doing anything to stop this. And I think it's an infringement on individual liberties. And I can agree that I don't judge anyone who has chosen to, and I don't judge anyone who chooses not to. take a vaccine. So thank you for that. One last question, if I may.
You're just under a minute. So-
We have a severe staffing shortage, especially in healthcare professions. And it's been brought to my attention that there have been students, nursing students, who have quit those programs because of vaccine mandates, either at the hospital facility or just pressure from instructors. But we've had students leave those programs of study. That does not just take a nurse out of a job for a few months or a year. That takes a healthcare professional out of that field for an entire lifetime. What would you do as a Board of Regents member board member to stop students from leaving our healthcare profession programs?
Well, as I said earlier, I think it ties back to my comment about the philosophy that a person convinced against his or her will remains unconvinced still. The government is not going to be able to mold people's behavior against their own desires. So I think, of course, healthcare professionals, depending upon the assignment of the nurse, the assignment of healthcare professionals, they've got to ensure safety for their patients. But in terms of mandating, you know my answer. I think the government has a very limited role that we can play to demand to change people's behavior by legislative fiat. It's not right.
Senator O'Shea.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just had a baby, and nowhere on my professional resume do I list my family. And so I hope that we don't judge you based on that, and I hope that no one ever judges me based on my family not being on my resume.
Thank you.
And I would like to move my questions to why you're here today, which is looking at you being a Board of Regents. So the question that I've been asking is, when I look at the gap between education and business, and I look at who I thought were very successful and made impacts on me as a student, professors. The professor, like I said, was getting the PhD because that was the only way to get a raise. So how can we reward and promote those professors who are doing a good job and making an impact for students in a way that isn't getting more and more degrees and spending more and more time in education?
I thank you for the opening because I want to come back to something I said before about why besides all of this being about the students, about what's intriguing and exciting to me. I think the higher education in Kansas has warning signs ahead of us that we ignore at our own peril. Those are things like the cost, accessibility, and degree completion. Things like the declining enrollment. Things like the lack of respect that higher ed has in the public. There's several things that I've been interested in. This is an article which I read with great interest called Improving College Affordability with New Higher Education Business Models. In my role as in business, that was very, very important to us. How do we make the products that we sold at the banks affordable, yet delivered with great, great high service? That's an issue I think we have to address. I'm not trying to start a food fight here, but on my list of things, and this is a list of issues that I call Pathway to Sustainability with Excellence and Student Access. I don't think time allows me to read all of those. But one of those on this list is a discussion about tenure. This is the Chronicle of Higher Education in October of last year, and the headline, of course, is Over AAUP and Faculty Objections, Georgia Regents Approve Changes in Post-Tenure Review. The fact of the matter is that we should not be, by pursuing tenure, so if it's the case, we should certainly not be suggesting to our educators that the only way that they can advance or get paid more is by degrees. It needs to be by who's great in the classroom, who's great in research, who's adding jobs and sustainability for our children and grandchildren. I'm very excited about the opportunity, yes, Senator Erickson, to work more closely with the legislature and the Board of Regents to come up with philosophical and policy issues and where we take these.
Thank you for that. And I recall conversations with different professors and even people who've looked into adjunct work. And I often think, I had some professors who were adjunct, and there was a financial advisor who's taught personal family finance and really enjoyed the class, and again, felt like it had a lot of real-world application. So what are your thoughts on adjunct professors and how that might be utilized better?
I share your view. I've been a part-time adjunct professor myself from time to time. But it comes right back around, and by the way, I don't want to get carried away on this tenure thing. I don't want it to be said that Winter's out there trying to destroy tenure, et cetera, et cetera.
You have 1
I
minute.
do think we need to be mindful and open to considering whether tenure, all the aspects of tenure are doing what we want them to do. But certainly the issue, as I said, should not be who has advanced degrees, but rather who is doing the job very efficiently and excellently in the classroom. And adjunct professors are, of course, a very economical way to deliver educational services. We have to make sure that they're qualified and they're doing their job well. But I can tell you, the most exciting professors that I had were people who walked in from the real world. And adjunct professors have a very important place to play. And that's really the primary reason why I bring up the whole tenure issues. I don't know whether we need to change the tenure rules. I know we ought to look at them, and we need to be open and not defensive about the ways that we can change and improve higher education for our children and grandchildren.
Thank you.
Senator Dietrich.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Welcome, went to our committee. So I asked the same questions of each candidate here. So your question is, the first question is, we've talked a lot about affordability, and some of the other conferees talked about some graduation completion rates, those kinds of things. What do you think the greatest challenge is to higher education in Kansas right now?
I think it's affordability and accessibility. Of course, degree completion is important, but if you can't afford to be in class, there's no way that you can complete your degree. So there's a reason I brought this, not because I believe in every word written in this book. I know that as I recall, I read somewhere that the average student debt in Kansas is something like $32,000 or something. So we have to be very mindful, especially for first-generation students and students whose parents did not have the kind of resources that I was blessed with, to be sure that we are not pricing ourselves out of enrollment and out of accessibility. There's no question about the fact that we need a core of experienced instructors, professors, full professors, assistant professors, but at the same time, we have to be open to other more excellent and cost-effective ways of delivering educational services in our universities and colleges.
Thank you very much. Second question is, what is there about the mission of the Kansas Board of Regents that is most powerful to you personally?
I think it's what I mentioned in the opening remarks. The most important thing, and I look back at it in my collegiate career and athletic career, is how much my teammates, those that could not afford college but for athletic scholarship, how much they blossomed and how excited they were to talk with each other about the classroom work, et cetera, et cetera. Higher education and learning in itself is extremely important for all of us. I'm a major advocate of higher education and education, period. But higher education has some built-in disadvantages when it comes to this building and the public. It's certainly the case, I'm sure now, as it was before. K through 12 has a lot of tools that higher education and the Regent system doesn't have. It has lawsuits. It has rules that say you have to go to college, you have to go to school. You can't be a truant. When's the last time that we've had a college student arrested for not going to class? All that means is that I think it's incumbent upon us to be looking at new ways to economize, new ways to deliver educational services in a way which allow our students of all kinds, of all economic status, to thrive and to enroll and be able to go to class. We definitely need to add around them, once they're here, support. But we're failing in some ways in that. But that's the exciting part, is to be able to look at new things, new ways to deliver services, even asking questions about tenure, asking questions about accessibility, to be able to allow other people to improve the numbers and to increase the numbers of people attending our colleges and universities.
Thank you. Now we have Senator Sykes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for being here, Went. I too was at your first confirmation hearing, and when we unanimously approved you to serve as a regent, so look forward to seeing you again. There was a serious allegation from one of my colleagues, and actually I don't think you were given the proper time to respond to it. And so my question, and I have a letter from a partner at Buckley Law Firm. He's an expert in the law surrounding mortgage lending and previously served as the co-chair of the Truth in Lending Subcommittee for the American Bar Association Consumer Financial Services Committee, and his firm represented People's Bank from February 2015 to 2018 during the time of question. And he was when you were serving as the chief executive officer, and he was general counsel. So in his capacity as counsel to the bank on the matter, he writes now to unequivocally state that there was no allegation of fraud or intentional or knowing wrongdoing against either the bank or Mr. Winter, even though we maintain the Peoples do not engage in any wrongdoing, intentional or otherwise, the decision to settle was ultimately made to avoid a lengthy and protracted defense. The Federal Reserve Bank of Kansas City had raised a concern regarding whether Peoples made misleading representations in your pricing disclosures, and they were unable to prove for either the loan file exactly how the interest rate on the loan had decreased as a result of discount points. That was their view, and in a novel interpretation of the law that they had seen communicated. So People's Pricings and Disclosure, I believe this was what you were doing for over a decade without question. But would you like to thoroughly respond to that allegation?
Thank you, Senator. I appreciate the opportunity. This is an extremely important thing to me. Our family, my father started this bank. We ran the bank under what we called the grandma test. We wanted all of our bankers to treat our guests, our customers, our guests, as if they were their own grandmother, with great respect and appreciation. So we strove to engage in that kind of service. I can tell you, to be told that there is a concern about unfair practices strikes to my core. It was very, very concerning to me. So we decided to fight it. And I will simply say this. I'm going to read again from our lawyer's letter, where he says, I'm an expert in the laws surrounding mortgage lending and served as co-chair, et cetera. He says, I write now, and this is addressed to Senator Sykes and President Masterson, I write now to unequivocally state there was no allegation of fraud or intentional or knowing wrongdoing against either the bank or Mr. Winter. And even though we maintain that Peoples did not engage in any wrongdoing, intentional or otherwise, the decision to settle was ultimately made to avoid a lengthy and very expensive dispute. This was not a lawsuit. This was purely a regulatory matter. This issue did not come up because of any consumer complaint. It came up during a regular routine review. Let me add one other thing, and I'm just going to quote again my lawyer. This was, in our view, that is the interpretation by the Fed that they applied during this review, was a novel interpretation of law that had never been previously communicated. People's pricing practices and disclosure terminology have been in continuous use by Peoples without complaint or criticism by either regulators
1
or
minute.
consumers for over a decade. This new finding, this novel interpretation that they chose to label under this unfair and deceptive act and practice was a practice that we had in the bank for more than 10 years. And there were 3 or 4 prior exams where they examined all our processes and they never said a word about it. This was a shock to us. I must tell you, I'm hurt to my core about any allegations that we would have done anything intentionally wrong. The consent order was against the bank, not against any individual, not against me, and I can tell you that, yes, all of us as CEOs bear ultimate responsibility for what happens, whether we know it or not. But I can tell you that I was never a part of any discussion whatsoever in the bank about this topic, other than to be very adamant about we have to defend ourselves. This isn't right. And I can tell you, I feel very strongly about that, and that none of us knowingly, intentionally did anything wrong in this bank regulatory dispute.
Thank you. And I apparently don't get my other question, but I wanted to ask.
Already went overtime.
Okay. Well, my other question, which we will do afterwards, was the same question that I had asked others. Why did you want to, and while you can, so you can think about that while you're answering these.
We're glad to put this into overtime with anybody who wants to do that.
Thank you.
So just to clarify, Mr. Winter, was the $2.8 million paid out to customers of People's Bank?
It was actually less than 2.4 million, and some 2.39, just less than
Paid
2.
out.
Excuse me?
Was the money paid out?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Yes, it was 2.4, not 2.8.
Okay. So now we're going to move on to my next question. You know, you have repeatedly said that you vigorously deny, and yet the Federal Reserve Bank did vote, or the Federal Reserve Board did vote on November 27, 2017, and it was a unanimous vote. And they indicated in their unanimous vote that People's Bank, for deceptive residential mortgage origination practices in violation of Section 5 of the Federal Trade Commission Act. Peoples told certain borrowers that they were paying an additional amount for discount points that would lower the borrower's interest rate. In fact, many borrowers did not receive a reduced rate. Now, I know that you have indicated that we weren't guilty, but the ruling of the Federal Reserve Board unanimously was that you must enter into a consent order. Did you sign that order?
I did, and
Okay,
that was a typical settlement disputed matter that happens all the time between parties that have different views.
You signed that order.
Oh, yeah, I did, yes.
Was that the same signature that was signed with your application for this position?
Correct.
Okay. And here's the interesting thing, because when I read through the application document, you are required under authorization and certification. The facts set forth in my application are true and complete. False statements, answers, or omissions on this application shall be sufficient cause for non-consideration or for dismissal after appointment or employment. So you're not under employment, but this is an appointment process. So it's interesting when you talk about being the most nonpartisan person that we would meet, that you share losing confidence in higher education, your concern about affordability, and many other issues that you brought up. You know, words have meaning. And so when we talk about affordability, whether it was the 2.8 that the Federal Reserve Board originally came up with, or the actual 2.4 that you say was paid out, that was an issue of affordability for those individuals. You indicated roughly 2,300 individuals that went in for home loans. So it is a little interesting to me that on the one hand, you're concerned about affordability for attending our colleges, but that wasn't the practice of your bank with regard to affordability of loans. At least that's what the federal board is saying. So let's move to a different issue. You indicate in your application that you are still a practicing attorney, though a part-time practicing attorney. Is that correct?
Yes.
So I'm sure that you're pretty well familiar with the Supreme Court Rule 226. What is that?
I don't have immediate recall of 226.
That is the ethical conduct of attorneys. And, you know, a portion of that is two applicable rules are 8.3 and 8.4. And 8.3, actually I'll jump to 8.4. It's professional misconduct for an attorney, a lawyer, to engage in conduct involving dishonesty, fraud, deceit, or misrepresentation. And yet that is exactly, those are almost identical words that are used under that consent order that you signed. It says the misrepresentations. Oh, that's the exact word from Rule 8.4. Misrepresentation on the disclosures concerning discount points. Later it says deceptive acts or practices and unsafe or unsound practices. So my question to you is, did you self-report this behavior as outlined and required in Rule 266? That would be Supreme Court Rule 226.
Madam Chair, no.
Okay.
The reason for that is none of the allegations involved me personally or any of our employees whatsoever. And the consent order from which you read is one of those agreements to disagree. We know what they said. We disagreed with that vehemently. To this day, we disagree with that, but we had to move on. And it was important. It's very, very difficult to fight the bureaucracy. The entrenched bureaucracy, particularly in the federal government, is very, very difficult to fight. And if you're a small bank, it becomes nearly impossible.
Actually,
So I can tell you that
the bank was not just in Kansas, but many other states. So are you saying that the Federal Reserve Board is just a big bureaucracy and you got caught up in it? Who would have been responsible?
I'm saying exactly what I've said before and exactly what the letter from Mr. Naaman says that you all have, and that is that never, we were never told by anybody in the Federal Reserve or anywhere about their change in interpretation. And we disagreed with it vehemently.
We've heard you say that repeatedly. So
And
I wanna
none of that
circle
was
around.
on me. All of the Rule 8.4 is about any personal involvement that I had. I had none of that.
So are we to surmise by that, if something similar were to occur at a university, that the president or chancellor wouldn't be responsible? It just happened and we would just make restitution to students?
No, of course not.
Okay.
But the question would of course be if there was some problem with a chancellor or president. Were they forewarned about it? Did they know that there would be that another body would take a different position without telling them? Those are all the questions that we would want to know.
Okay.
And in this case,
And I
the
can-
letter from the lawyer specifically goes in.
You have a 5-minute time as well because you've exceeded, and if you're going to exceed, I would like to get time as well.
I did indicate, because Senator Solontrop said that he had some questions. You chose to read the letter, but I told you that, yes, you would have an opportunity to ask a question. As chair, yes, I do have an opportunity to speak.
And I'm glad to continue to answer questions.
So you have more than 5 minutes, but the rest of us do not.
Well, I'm going to wrap up on some things. Yes, I am. Thank you. You're welcome. Could you please talk to us about CRT, critical race theory? Because we did hear in your last hearing, we heard that it was a theory and essentially there really doesn't need to be time spent on theories. We need to focus on something that is concrete. So could you talk to us some more about what you believe critical race theory is?
Well, I don't know. I got to admit, I don't fully understand it because I think, and I've read a lot about it, and I think there's some people who say it's X, there's people who say it's Y. I know this. I was involved in a matter which hurt me deeply in Lawrence, where I was accused of being a racist, and that was because I refused to support, in a nonprofit I was involved with, a statement that was to the effect that we supported any kind of demonstration in favor of Black Lives Matter. I would only support a peaceful, nonviolent kind of protest.
Okay.
Other folks decided, no, we don't want to condition the right to protest with nonviolence or peacefulness. And as a result of my position, I was told that I'm a racist. And I asked my 40-year-old daughter, why are they calling me a racist? And her answer was, I don't know the people who said that, but it sounds like they are of the woke persuasion, and that there is a theory going around that if you're Caucasian, you must of necessity be a racist.
Okay. Could you?
I resent that, and that hurt me deeply. And so I got to tell you, I don't have a very open mind about that theory, and I can just tell you that there is no reason that I can imagine why we would teach such a divisive theory in our universities. We need to teach facts, and the facts about this country and how we need to eliminate disparate treatment speak loudly for themselves. We don't need argumentative theories.
One last question for you, please, sir. You were asked previously about making donations to elected officials, and specifically about those that currently serve in the Kansas Senate who will be voting on this. You indicated you didn't recall, and yet we all know that that information is readily available through the Secretary of State's office. So would it be a surprise to you that just in a quick search that you did in fact donate to 3 current sitting members of the Kansas Senate?
Wouldn't surprise me.
Okay, but you didn't bother to check that even though that you knew others had asked that?
No, I didn't. I didn't realize that we were going to be here talking about such a detail. And I can tell you that I think it's important.
Well, it was asked of the other 2 nominees. So at this time, I will call on Senator Solentrop. No, they know that we're probably not going to get there until about 1:15. And I had indicated that we may need to spend a little extra time. I had. And to be clear, Mr. Winter, you were aware that there were concerns specifically about the issues we've discussed today with your application by the governor's office. Is that correct?
Well, I certainly was aware of the questions about the consent order that did not involve me personally, did not involve anyone
But
personally.
you were made aware that there were concerns about your application by the governor's office.
We had questions about, we had discussions about why did you not answer this, why didn't you not answer that, and I gave them the answers, and I'm glad to, by the way, I'm very glad to talk about that as well, if you'd like to discuss my answers and the completeness of those answers.
I wanted to be clear to those that are attending and those that are viewing that you did know ahead of time that these questions, I was assured by Will Lawrence that there had been discussions and that you knew that there were concerns. So at this time, I'll call on Senator Solentrop.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For the record, and as a result of a previous senator's comments, I do not believe the consent order are allegations. These are, this is written as fact and signed by the CEO, president, and owner of People's Bank. And I'd also like to remind the committee, or make the committee aware that under our current banking regulations in this country, we can be held personally responsible and liable for the actions of the bank. So to say that, you know, they did not implicate a particular CEO or something of that nature is not quite accurate. You know, as an owner of a financial institution in this state, in this country, you will be held personally responsible and liable for the actions of that financial institution. Thank you.
Senator, I'm glad you brought that up. Let me respond. I'm very aware of that. In fact, let me tell you that I know that the Fed has a very powerful array of enforcement actions, and yes, I'm reading from some notes because it was very important for me. The Fed has a very powerful array of enforcement actions they can take depending upon the degree of fault or knowledge by management. First of all, they can assess fines against the bank. Secondly, they can assess penalty assessments or punitive damages, including, as you may know, Senator, civil money penalties against directors personally. 3, they could order the mortgage department or any part of the bank to be shut down. 4, they can require the bank to discipline or terminate one or more officers. Or 5, in cases involving personal incompetence, breach of duty, or malfeasance, by in effect blackballing an officer or director from ever being employed in banking in the future. In this case, none of those was involved. 0 of those other sanctions was involved. The only sanction involved was against the bank. And regarding this novel interpretation, I can tell you it is very, very hard to accept when your own government